Ooh, welcome back to Amazin But True, our New York Mets podcast from the New York Post. I am your host, the Podfather, Jake Brown. Those highlights you heard, courtesy of SNY. It's me solo today. Figgy will be on Thursday's show, which is a big one. We saved him for the post Justin Verlander debut show. We'll have Figgy break that down on Thursday. That is a big episode as we get the long-awaited Mets debut, a future Hall of Famer, former Cy Young winner last year, Justin Verlander. Can't wait to see him on the mound. Well, this show, we have my good friend and co-host of the Mets pod with SNY. He knows everything, Mets minors, Mets majors, but he's, covered a lot of these guys like Baty and Alvarez who are hot right now. Joe DeMayo will join me in just a few minutes here on Amazin But True. And the Mets avoid getting swept. They really lost 1.5 games out of 3. And you know how Twitter goes and the negativity goes. And I got to remind people, touch some grass, live a little. It's May 2nd. The Mets are over 500. They're hanging afloat. I know they're not world beaters right now. I know there's some struggles. The middle relief is a reason for concern. They suck right now. But like I tweeted, Scherzer's back this week from his suspension. Verlander debuts this week. As much as Mets fans say they hate it, Carlos Carrasco is back next week. It's a guy who sub-4 ERA, won 15 games last year. People want to just be like, Carlos Carrasco, he sucks. Him coming back makes the Mets worse. That's just not the case. He was clearly pitching hurt. Let's see a little more Carrasco before we send him away and send him packing. It's a good problem to have where they'll have, a plethora now of arms, and they'll be like, all right, David Peterson, I'm just sorry, you got to go. You struggled, you got to go. Tyler McGill, you've been good. Through 5 innings, you're a good pitcher, but you might have to go to the bullpen. Joey Lucchesi, you're going to have to give him a few more starts because he has been solid so far. So the Mets will have extra arms, and that's what they came into the season hoping. And Jose Quintana is going to be back, either in June or July, we expect. So this is a good problem to have, because you're going to need one or two of those arms to fill in that void in a bullpen that has struggled. And luckily, David Robertson, his .6 ERA, has been incredible. 2 innings for the save on Monday in game 2. And I like that Buck did that. He shut the door with his best reliever. Now he won't pitch Tuesday. You give him a day. Maybe he's back for Wednesday in Detroit as the Mets take on the Tigers this week in Verlander and Scherzer's old home, and they'll pitch back-to-back. Tuesday, Lucchesi, 6:40 p.m. Wednesday, Scherzer, 6:40 p.m. Verlander's debut Thursday at 1:10 p.m. And we'll record the next episode, me and Figgy of Amazin But True, after that 1:10 p.m. game on Thursday. One of these guys goes to the bullpen. That is fine. But my God, there are Mets fans in game 1 on Monday ready to send the season packing who said this team sucked. Billy Epler didn't do it. Listen, I agree they probably could have got another reliever. But when you lose Edwin Diaz out of nowhere right before the season, it puts you in a bad spot. It's not like there's just relievers hanging out there who are going to save you. There just isn't. And when you lose Brooks Raley here, he's going to be out. And I know he hasn't been incredible thus far, but he's a key piece of the bullpen. He was one of their key acquisitions for this bullpen of the offseason. And when he goes down now, that puts you in a tough spot. And Jeff Brigham finally gives up runs Monday. He's come back down to earth. You're expecting him to be good, but without Raley, without Diaz, it's you don't want to make excuses here. But there's guys you're relying on who have not been out there, and you're going to lose games when that happens. Teams lose games. 90-plus win teams lose 70 times. So the Mets are 16-13. They're 3 games back of the Braves. I'm not ready to say they were completely outclassed in this series. They fought back Monday. When Denny Reyes is your starter for game 1, you knew one, don't bet on that game. Don't bet on the Mets that game. Stay away from that game. But you also knew that they were likely to lose, and they fought back. They made it a game. It became 9-8 on an Eduardo Escobar homer, who's realizing, his chances are continuing to get limited and limited and limited, and he will become a full-time bench bat because Brett Baty homered off a lefty which we wanted to see him hit off lefties. He did that, and he is just hot, folks. Brett Baty is scorching hot. He's up to 333 now, 13 for 39, 2 homers, 4 RBIs. And Brett Baty's going to be playing every day. It's no longer he's sitting versus lefties, play Escobar. There's going to be situations that happens just because he needs a breather, and you get Escobar out there. But Brett Baty's your full-time third baseman. And Francisco Alvarez, a lot of delusional fans were ready to send him packing after 5 games. People got to realize it takes patience with the youth. It takes patience in a baseball season. And it's time for you to be patient. This team's going to be fine. And they got a big week ahead where you got to beat up on these lousy teams. Go win 5 out of 6 against the Tigers and then coming home against the Rockies, who are 9-20, entering the day on Tuesday. Go win these games against bad teams. 10-17 are the Tigers entering Tuesday. 2 terrible teams. The worst you should do here is 4-2. But with the pitching, how the lineups match up, I think the Mets should sweep the Tigers and then at least take 2 out of 3 from the Rockies. I think you got to go 5-1 here. There's not must wins. It's not you have to or the season's over. But win the teams, beat the teams on the schedule that you should, and go 5-1 here. And I'll be pretty confident about this team. But Francisco Alvarez is hitting now, folks. Francisco Alvarez has come alive, and that is a reason to get excited. His defensive work has been better, and he's hitting a clutch go-ahead 2-run double in Game 2 on Tuesday. When the Mets needed at most 2 outs, 6th inning, down a run after McGill, gave up the lead, and I'm perfectly fine with Buck leaving him in there because I'd rather McGill, honestly, than Drew Smith. I know I keep hating on Drew Smith, and he did a good job when he did come in. But I was fine with that decision to leave McGill in with the bases loaded. Let him get that one more guy. He just didn't. It was the right move, tough result. Mets end up winning the game. And that's something you can't overlook when talking about this team thus far. There's been resiliency, comebacks, attempts at comebacks, getting the game close, and that stuff will be fixed here. And you got to factor in, once these starters are now back, Scherzer, Verlander, Verlander, first 1 or 2, you're probably going to get 5 innings, maybe 6. We get it. You got to stretch him out. This is kind of another spring training for him now. He only had the 1 rehab start. But when things get going, you need 7 out of those guys, sometimes 8. And that's going to be the savior here. Senga, you need to get a little bit more out of him. You need these guys to get into the 7th inning. And once that happens, you're in better shape. Because then you got your Ottavino, you got your Robertson, you got your Drew Smith, you got a little Brigham. That's when things will get going, when these starters are out there and good. People are like jumping off a bridge when they have Denny Reyes and Jose Buto out there. I had a lot of Denny's at Hofstra. The $2 pancakes, they hit different. Late night little Denny special was great when you're a broke college kid. But that's when you're a broke college kid. This is the big leagues. No offense to Denny Reyes. Denny Reyes should not be starting a game for the Mets the rest of the season. And, it was a tough spot. Friday, they played 5 innings. It was a clown show. It was buffoonery. That game should have never been played, but you get it. You didn't want to have 2 doubleheaders in August. You understand that. Maybe next time, schedule the 4-game series in August when the weather's going to be good and not in April. It's just frustrating that one of your 7 games against the Braves at home is shortened in 5 innings, and they probably lose the game anyway. It was Fried versus Peterson. Peterson struggled, but that weather sucked. It was pouring during the game. They got it in, and that was that. But it sucks that one of the 7 games against your division rival in this new schedule this year is rain shortened. It sucks that's how it worked out, but it's over with now. You're not going to lose sleep over it. It's done. It's over with. Mets lose Friday. They lose Game 1 Monday. They win Game 2. Well, they go to Detroit, and don't panic. All is just going to be okay, Mets fans. And let's see them beat these bad teams and stop the panic. But it's good to see your youth in Alvarez hitting now, and Baty hitting everyone now. McNeil with a nice homer, a big go-ahead homer on Monday in Game 2. Pete had the homer Monday. He needed that, getting out of his little schneid. And, Nimmo's being Nimmo. Defensively, he just continues to wonder, continues to amaze. Brandon Nimmo should be up for a Gold Glove the way he's playing defense this season. And while I always wasn't the biggest Brandon Nimmo fan and lover, I'm all in now. He is just fantastic at the plate. He's a little bit better on the base pass, and he's just fantastic defensively. He has been a key part of this Mets team, the heart and soul of this Mets team at the top of the order. Once Starling Marte gets going here, this line will be cooking. Lindor's driving in plenty of runs. Maybe you want to see his average go up, but he's driving in plenty of runs. Pete's driving in the runs. Bottom of the order is hitting. Vogelback's been better. And when the lineup's coming together, the rotation is now healthy. That should help out this bullpen. But, eventually they're going to have to get a reliever. They're going to have to get an elite reliever. It's going to take trading a prospect. You're not going to trade Alvarez, Baty. Hopefully not Mauricio, but maybe it takes trading a Vientos to get, an elite setup man to help Ottavino and Robertson, because there's a lot of pressure on those guys. If one of them starts to falter, the Mets are royally screwed. So luckily they've been great, but eventually they're going to give up runs. So they're going to have to get help eventually. Well, beat the teams you should this week, and all should be fine in Mets land. We'll talk about these young guys. We'll talk about why Mets fans shouldn't panic, outside maybe the middle relief, with a guy who covers the Mets and hosts a Mets pod himself. He hosts the Mets pod. They got creative with the naming with Connor Rogers with SNY. Our buddy Joe DeMayo joins Amazin But True next. All right, Amazin But True. Jake Brown here. A little Mets crossover pod here on this part of the show as we bring in my buddy Joe DeMayo. It's always funny. It's like the fifth inning. It's a rally, bases loaded, and they give him the read. He gets the read. I think it's almost the same time every time. He hosts the Mets pod with the wonderful hair of Connor Rogers with SNY. And as you know, the Post and SNY, we have a little digital partnership. So it's good to partner up here with Joe DeMayo. Joe, welcome to the show. And how does it feel to have Gary Cohen call your name at the same time every game?
Once that gets old, I'm just going to retire from the game. So once that gets old, I mean, growing up a Mets fan, obviously like you, whole life watching Gary since 18 years ago. If you told me that there would be a time that almost every game or every few games, whatever the case may be, Gary Cohen would say my name live on television, I don't think I'd believe you.
Or when he did like the bit, I guess when Keith was on and Keith forgot that he was on and he was like, Keith, you were on that show. He's like, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's Keith for you, right? And Gelb's got after him a little bit too, which was really funny for us. But yeah, I mean, we've had Gelbs, we've had Keith, and having Gary, like, that's another pinch me moment, having guys like that on the show that we've watched for so long.
Yeah, that's always special, talking to the guys you grew up with. We've done it here, and it never gets old. Well, let's talk about this team. There's obviously the negativity amongst Twitter, and as there always is, Joe. In my mind, what I'm negative about is the bullpen. I'm concerned with the middle relief. I'm not really concerned about the lineup. I'm excited to see Verlander and Scherzer this week together finally, just like the old days, and just like the old days in Detroit as they pitch in Detroit. You love to see how that worked out with the schedule. Are you in the same state of panic about the bullpen? What are you panicking about this team early on here?
I'm not a panic guy by nature, but if there was a thing I was most concerned about, it definitely would be the middle relief. Obviously, when Edwin Diaz went down, that meant everyone else had to push up a role, and David Robertson so far has held down the ninth inning and save opportunities very well. Adam Ottavino's been fine. Drew Smith's been largely fine, but then after that, it's been a lot of hit and miss at best, and a lot of that is injury related, right? With Diaz being hurt, that, like I said, shifts everyone else up. And you have guys like Bryce Montes de Oca had Tommy John, who I had hopes for, out for the year. Sam Coonrod had I think a high grade lat strain, so he's going to be out a while. And Steven Ridings, who they picked up from the Yankees, hasn't thrown a ball in a Mets uniform in the minors, majors, nothing yet. So they've been hurt a lot, and they're trying to make the most out of the likes of Jeff Brigham, and now Zach Muckenhirn got the call, who was pitching really well in AAA Syracuse. And the injuries to rotation that you mentioned, with Verlander now coming back and Scherzer coming off the suspension, and it sounds like Cookie Carrasco is on the mend. Those guys being hurt also hurt the ability, if you wanted to be flexible with a Tyler McGill or wanted to be flexible with a Joey Lucchesi and put them in the bullpen. You simply couldn't afford to, because the Mets were down almost their whole rotation. So all things considered, I think Mets fans should be generally happy with how this team has performed, considering it's Denny Reyes, it's Jose Butto, it's Joey Lucchesi, and the offense hasn't gotten like fully intact yet. Starling Marte's not performing quite like we would expect him to. Lindor's been a little up and down, but I feel good about where they're at. But just like you, Jake, the middle relief is a concern.
Yeah, what do you do here? Your Buck Showalter, your Billy Epler when Carrasco's back, and I know Mets fans will say that's a net negative, but they forget that the guy pitched to a sub-4 ERA, won 15 games last year as a veteran. The clubhouse loves him, good clubhouse guy. I think, that injury could contribute to some of the rough starts early on. Some of these people forget that some guys get hurt and no one knows about it until a week or two later, and that could have been a reason. So I'd like to see at least, 4 or 5 more starts from Carrasco because he'll give you a good 6 innings, 3 runs, and I think that's what this rotation needs. But he's in there. Verlander, Scherzer, Senga. What do you do? Do you like McGill out of the bullpen and you leave Lucchesi in the rotation? We expect Peterson to probably be sent down, but how do you work that fifth spot when Carrasco's back?
It's going to be very interesting, right? I think McGill has shown through 5 innings, he's good. It seems like the 6th inning has really bit him the couple times he's gotten to the 6th inning. Obviously, that happened on Monday's game. He was cruising, and I was at the doubleheader, so I was just chilling, and McGill was going, and 6th inning came around, and obviously he got beat up then. So I've always thought long-term Tyler McGill is a bullpen piece, but I mean, given the status of this rotation, it's going to be a really hard line to toe because if you move him or Lucchesi into a relief role, do you have to stretch them back out if another starter gets hurt in a month or 2 from now? So it's going to be a tough line to toe, but where I stand right now, I really like what Joey Lucchesi has shown. It's only 2 starts, so let's see how he pitches in Detroit. But if Joey Lucchesi shows out again in Detroit, I think you'd be hard pressed to take him out of the rotation, at least in the interim. But with Peterson and McGill and even Lucchesi, they all have minor league options too. So if you keep Lucchesi in temporarily and he gets shelled to start or 2, you could send him down and bring McGill or Peterson if he figures stuff out in AAA back up. So it's going to be interesting. I don't think the plan would be right now to shift any of them to the bullpen quite yet, but maybe that's something we look at here in the next couple months.
Yeah, it's a tough call because McGill, like you said, 5 innings, great. After that is not. Yeah. And Lucchesi brings an interesting element with the slurve or the churve, as I should say. I know I had to get corrected on Twitter for saying slurve and not churve. He brings that interesting element, but does that work in like a 1-inning spot? Like Lucchesi's never really been a reliever, where McGill at one point, did attempt. He was trying to be a reliever when the Mets need him to be. So that's going to be, I mean, it's not a bad problem to have, and there's always more injuries that come down the road. And then you got to factor in Jose Quintana on his way back, probably, by the All-Star break, what they do then, because then you're going to have a couple of guys get sent down. You're going to get a couple guys unhappy, but that's something to revisit down the road. But I mean, you got to be like me, kind of excited here to see Verlander, Scherzer, Senga. Like this was the big 3. This is what we envisioned, a playoff scenario of game 1, 2, and 3. We're getting our first taste of it this week. And, I think Mets fans early on have negative feelings about Verlander because he gets hurt 2 hours for opening day. But now I think the excitement is kicking in. And now we could see what these guys have. We could, put away the fact that these guys are 40 years old and let's see what they got in a Mets uniform. I think that's something here this week in Detroit to look forward to.
I think that's really exciting. It still hasn't set in that Justin Verlander's a Met because he really hasn't been a Met yet.
We've only seen Kate Upton as a Met. We haven't seen Justin Verlander as a
Met. But no, I'm really excited. I mean, signing Justin Verlander that was the answer to letting Jacob deGrom walk. deGrom obviously has his injury going on with Texas, but when they let him go, the answer was, all right, well, you had the 2 ace thing. How are you going to rebound? And they waited no more than a couple days to lock in Verlander. And I do think the injury that he was dealing with, I think they were just overly cautious given his age, given where the Mets are at the season. As much as guys like you and me and the people listening to the show live and die by every single day and every single pitch, the Mets do not and cannot operate that way. So for them, I think if it were a pennant race, Verlander might have missed like a start or maybe 2 starts at most. Instead, they gave him the time, and now he's coming back. He looked great. His stuff looked very normal down in Binghamton in his rehab. He was up to 95, 96. So I think he's good to go, and I can't wait to see him pitch a game in a Mets jersey, and Citi Field, once I think his first start at Citi Field will be electric. And I think that lines up like he's going to start like 2 or 3 straight on the road before he even starts at Citi Field if the rotation continues to line up as it is. But I can't wait to see him at Citi, and certainly can't wait to see him this week in Detroit.
Yeah, I think it would line up. It looks like I would think against the Guardians that weekend of May 19th. I don't know if I'm
Yeah.
doing the math right, but I think around that time. So I'm sure that'll be a packed house. Excited to see that. Joe DeMayo, PSL to Flushing, the Mets pod, joining us here on Amazing But True for a few more minutes. Is it like seeing your children grow up, seeing Alvarez, seeing Baty, covered the minors for so long? Is this like you don't have kids? I'm pretty sure, right? You don't have children.
I do
yet.
not.
So,
I do
so
not. Yeah.
is it like is it like these are seeing your babies kind of grow up and grow old and now hitting? I mean, everyone after 5 games wanted to send Alvarez back down and say he's not ready. Now he's hitting the ball, and Brett Baty's just tearing the cover off the ball and a homer off a lefty. Fans are worried this guy can't hit lefties. Well, it looks like he's hitting lefties, righties, in between, and everyone right now. This has got to be like seeing your children just have their bar mitzvah.
I love it, man. It's one of my favorite things that I do because we talk to these guys throughout their whole path. Like I talked to Brett Baty 2 weeks after he was drafted. I talked to Alvarez when he was in Double-A last year. So like just getting to know these guys throughout, and then seeing them actually like come through and be able to live their dream. And so often over the last handful of years, the Mets have just traded away prospect after prospect. Small deal, big deal, didn't matter. They were trading prospects away, and they've held firm on some of these top guys. And I think it's finally starting to pay off with Baty, who, I said it when I wrote on SNY.TV. I said it on the Mets pod. I tweeted about it as much as I could. Brett Baty should have been the opening day third baseman. He wasn't. It kind of is what it is, but he's here now. And to Buck's credit, where we have kind of criticized him for not playing Alvarez enough, he's throwing Brett Baty out there every day, and Brett's showing that he's worthy of it. Like you said, hitting lefties, the 430-foot home run, 108 miles an hour exit velocity. Brett Baty is just a hitter. He's been a hitter since he was back at Lake Travis High School when he was playing football with Jets receiver Garrett Wilson. But he's been a hitter even dating back to then. So him hitting is not surprising, and he's made some great growth defensively. Where I don't think he's ever winning a Gold Glove at third base, but I think there was a perception with both Baty and Alvarez that defense was going to be this significant hindrance to them. And they both look fine. And especially Alvarez, a guy that in the offseason, I had people ask me, is he a big league catcher at all, or is he a DH? As of this recording here on Tuesday, he's in the 92nd percentile in baseball in pitch framing. So not only is he, and he's got a strong arm, he's got to work on a bit of his pop time, getting it out quicker, but he has a very strong arm. To me, he looks comfortable. He's blocking balls in the dirt pretty well. Seems like he has a good rapport with the pitchers. So I've been pleasantly surprised with Alvarez behind the plate, and now you're seeing the bat start to pick up. He's hitting the ball hard finally. He's working a little better at bats. I do think consistent playing time will be big for him, because I think he put a little more pressure on himself when Nito was playing 2 out of every 3 or 3 of every 4, and Alvarez was kind of subbing in. He felt like he had to hit 3 home runs that day because that was the only day he was going to play for a few. So I think Buck is going to get him more and more in the lineup, and now he's hitting, I think, 360 over his last 7 games. And like you said, Baty's raking. But I absolutely love seeing the young kids, and there's more to come, man. This system is trending in the right direction. Maybe not so much imminently. Maybe Mauricio and Vientos, if you want to talk about them, we can. But there's definitely more prospects to come, and the Mets are focused on improving that system.
Yeah, this is why we bring Joe DeMayo on. My Hofstra education doesn't cover framing statistics around the big leagues. It's good for broadcasting, not great for numbers. My mom would not be that proud as a math teacher. The bullpen, and you talk about the guys in the minors. Is there a fix? Jeff Brigham gave up some runs on Monday. He's looked mostly good, but he's not perfect. Is there a fix in the minors? Because they're not going to be able to make a trade realistic probably till July, and they're going to have to make a trade. I mean, that's a must. You're going to get Quintana back. You're going to hope for Diaz in October. But this patchwork middle relief to get the ball to David Robertson and Adam Ottavino, and especially Robertson, has been absolutely incredible for this team. It's been a godsend. Is there someone in the minors to fill the void right now for the next 6 to 8 weeks?
I mean, I look at this like you're going to have to be shuffling these middle relievers back and forth and try to ride like a week or two hot stretch at a time. There is one arm in AAA Syracuse that I think is warranted to keep an eye on, and it's Grant Hartwig. So he was an undrafted free agent by the Mets 2020 draft. Yeah, no, it's 23. So 2021 draft. Because last year was his first year in the minors. And he actually was almost going to quit baseball. So he finished college at Miami of Ohio. He didn't get drafted, so he just assumed his baseball journey was over. He was gonna like continue on to like try to get like his doctorate or something. Super smart guy. And the Mets called and he was like, well, I'll give this a shot. And last year he pitched at every level of the Mets minors. Started in low A St. Lucie, got to Brooklyn, got to Binghamton, even got to Syracuse at the end of the year, all within his first pro season. And he's pitching very well through 8 outings so far in AAA Syracuse. So I think Grant Hartwig, someone to keep an eye on. He's a sinker slider guy, up to 96 or so. Get some swings and misses. I believe he has 14 strikeouts in 9 innings or something like that. So he can get some swings and misses, and he's probably it. Otherwise, I mean, Eric Orzi's a decent story, but he's been up and down for AAA Syracuse, and they called up Zach Muckenhirn yesterday, who was pitching very well down there. But there's not a ton of answers. It's a lot of Jeff Brigham's and John Curtis's and guys of that ilk, and they're just gonna have to shuffle them up and down and just try to cobble together little mini streaks out of them until, like you said, we get maybe closer to the deadline, and they'll have to be aggressive in adding to the bullpen.
Yeah, this is going to be a prove it, trade deadline for Billy Epler. I mean, if he doesn't do anything major, and the Mets don't, aren't in the World Series, I think Epler should be on the hot seat because he did not have a great deadline last year. Obviously, we point to the Darren Ruff trade, which looks like a colossal failure. Grant Hartwig, it sounds like the 16th president of the United States with that name. 14 strikeouts in 12 innings thus far. What about Muckenhirn? Because he is a lefty. Does he have any potential? I know nothing about him.
He was a minor league invite to spring training, so he's not like a young Mets prospect or anything, and he's just pitched well. And I mean, they need a lefty because Brooks Raley's on the IL, and he was kind of next up on the lefty depth chart. He's kind of your pitchability lefty, is not big power stuff, and hopefully he could come out and just get some lefties out here for a little bit until Raley's able to come back.
You mentioned Mauricio and Vientos, fans again clamoring for at least Vientos because they've seen him rake in the minors. They've seen him rake in spring training, but there's not really a spot for them. I don't feel like. Do you see either or one or the other or both coming up at any point this season for the Mets?
I assume if Vientos will eventually find his way up. He's on the 40-man roster. He's performing OPS well over 1,000. So like he's probably big league ready offensively, but where does he fit on this roster right now? Like
really just a DH, right?
Yeah, he's pretty much a first base DH at this point, and that's okay. Like he could be that right-handed type of DH, but the Mets aren't going to like cut ties with Tommy Pham and pay him $6 million to go away to call up Mark Vientos. So I don't know if that fit is imminent, but like you said earlier on in the show, Jake, there's injuries. There's going to be things that happen. Mark Vientos will find his way to Queens this year. As far as Ronny Mauricio goes, they're finally letting him play somewhere other than shortstop. This is something they should have done probably last year. I've been calling for it for quite some time, but alas, they finally done it. He's gotten some reps at second base. I believe they have plans for him to get some reps at third, some reps in left, and they're going to kind of figure out where he best fits defensively because for transparency, I was kind of always the low guy on Ronny Mauricio because I'm a big believer in plate discipline and seeing pitches and working good at bats because the power got there last year. He hit 24 or 26 home runs for AA Binghamton last year because he's finally growing into his body. He's 6'3", upwards of 220 now. Like he's a big, strong kid. And his problem was he would chase everything. And when you chase everything, you don't get the pitches to hit. Now, so far this year in AAA Syracuse, he's drawing a few walks. Walks won't generally be a big part of his game, but he's being a little more selective where he is letting some pitches go in the dirt. He's letting some pitches high go. And now you're seeing when those pitches are in the middle, he's doing damage to them. So that's what we need to see from Mauricio. I don't know if you'll see him this year or not, but they're in process of figuring out his long-term defensive home. And so far, he's off to a fantastic start, and it might be one of those things that I ended up too low on Ronny Mauricio.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting where they put him if he does make the call up here. And it's going to be interesting to see if they keep him. You would expect to keep him, but to get these relievers or to get someone at the trade deadline, one of these prospects is going. Hopefully it's not Vientos or Mauricio, but at some point you're going to have to trade someone. And the immediate thought would be McNeil to left. Canna's off the books after this year,
Yep.
and then you play Mauricio at second. That's the thought, and then you got Mauricio, Lindor, Alonso, Baty, and Alvarez, and you're drooling at the thought of that because on paper it looks like the future is bright here in Mets land, and the future is bright here in Mets podcast land. Joe DeMayo, follow him on Twitter at PSL2Flushing, and check out the Mets pod he does with Connor Rogers. And you have decent hair, but do you ever look at his hair and be like, I just don't compare?
Yeah, it's not fair, but Connor's a stud, and everything he does right now, super happy for him. I mean, everything doing with NBC in the draft, and obviously the Mets pod. We have such a blast doing that. It's it was a venture that started over kind of Twitter DMs. I followed Connor for NFL draft stuff. He followed me for Mets stuff. We didn't know each other. I would DM him NFL draft questions. He would DM me Mets questions, and then one day he was like, "We should do a Mets podcast," and lo and behold, we started That's So Mets, which was our own thing. And we did, ironically, 86 episodes of it before SNY picked us up, and we formed the Mets pod, and we're in year 2 of that. And we couldn't be having a better time. And I love working with Connor.
Listen, you did 86. Have you hit episode 69 to make it the 6986 duo here of these two pods?
Yeah, I don't even know what episode we're on, to be honest with you. Our producer Jeff keeps track of that. I just show up every Tuesday because that's when we do the show, every Tuesday or Wednesday. Kind of we try to work it around the Mets schedule as best we could. But every Tuesday or Wednesday, check out the Mets pod wherever you get your podcasts. And our producer Jeff is the guy that keeps track of episode numbers. I show up, I turn on this little camera, plug in this mic, and just spew my nonsense about the Mets.
I just have 2 fancy photos behind you. I'm trying to see.
That's Michael Scott over my right shoulder.
Scott, yeah. And then what's the other one?
That's some random baseball player. I had Roger Federer up there, but for some reason that was frowned upon. So Roger Federer came down and a baseball person went up.
Yeah, it's good to have a baseball. I was just trying to see who the swing was like Mike Piazza or something, but it's just a random player swing. So
just some random dude that probably hit a nuke.
Yeah, well, that's what Brett Baty's doing. That's what the young guys are doing right now. And Joe DeMayo has been all over them since they were born in a minor league land. And follow him on Twitter at PSL2Flushing. Joe, we'll do it again soon. And thanks for coming on Amazin But True.
Anytime, Jake. We'll talk soon.
Alrighty, great stuff there from my buddy Joe DeMayo, who's locked in all over the minors and all Mets coverage with the Mets pod. That says goodnight to episode 141 of Amazin But True, our Mets podcast from the New York Post. Thanks to you, Andrew Hartz, for producing the show, as always, with me. Make sure you watch this show on the New York Post Sports YouTube page. Give us that thumbs up and comment below. Are you worried about the Mets? Like, what do you think here? How are you feeling, Mets fans? Let me know in the comments and tweet us at Amazin But True and tweet me at Jake Brown Radio. If you're an audio person, give us that 5-star rating. Please write in a positive review. We appreciate your support. Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you get podcasts is where you get us. And you can follow Joe DeMayo. Thanks for him for coming on at PSL2Flushing. Well, Mets go to Detroit this week. I am pumped to see Justin Verlander, man. Like, we panicked about him early on, that he got hurt, that he's older. We worry that is he done? This guy won a Cy Young last year. I want to see this guy get a good 20 to 25 starts here. I'd love to see him go the rest of the way, and I want to see him dominate, because when this guy is on, there's going to be outings. He can give you 9 innings, and you don't have to worry about the bullpen. That's 1 out of every 5 days. You get, say, 7, at least 8, 7, and sometimes 8 innings. And then you just hand it off to Robertson. That's what can save this team, is the starting pitching. And they got 3 great ones, 2 elite ones, and 1 we think great one at Senga. And then good other pieces. Carrasco, I think, is going to, come around and be fine now. I think the IL trip will help him. He was clearly hurt before that. Like, there was clearly something off, because he was really bad. And I think he'll get it back together. And if he doesn't, you got Lucchesi pitching well. You got McGill pitching at least 5 innings. And then you got eventually Quintana coming. So this team will be okay. Hang afloat and beat the teams you should. And they should be fine. 6 games, homestand. 6 out of 7 they played. I didn't go to one of them. I mean, I'm having withdrawals. I gotta like scratch myself right now. Like what the hell? I went a whole week not going to a Met game. But the weather was just cold. There was Knicks going on, Rangers going on. Now the Rangers are over. That opens up a little bit of the schedule. What a colossal failure that was. You could hear on the Up in the Blue Seats podcast, but Rangers is done, and now it's Knicks and it's Mets, baby. Knicks, come back, win this series, beat the Heat, go to the conference finals, and Mets beat up on these bad teams, and all will be just okay in New York land outside of the Rangers' nightmare. And now New Jersey is left. And I'll say this. I would rather the Devils over any of these other teams. I know Rangers, there's a lot of people who don't agree with that. Like, their rivals, don't root for them. I'd rather a local team get through in hockey than the Kraken versus the Hurricanes. Like, come on. Like, you'd rather a local, and it's a story good for the market. It's good for the New York Post. Get them a couple extra clicks for the hockey season. All right, guys, that's enough out of me. For Joe DeMayo, Andrew Hart, I'm Jake Brown. We'll be back on Thursday night with Nelson Figueroa after Justin Verlander's season debut. Can't wait to talk about that and see that. Enjoy the games in Detroit, folks, and we'll talk to you Thursday night right here on Amazin But True. Let's go, Mets.